So now we're back on the Path of Exile 2 trade site, and I've got a trick to show you. We're going to start to fill out this form based on the item text of the boots that we've been working with, which were rare and item level of 33, with some evasion on there and a rune socket, as well as some movement speed, some lightning resistance, and some life regen. But before we hit search, we're going to click the 3 dots in Chrome, More Tools, and Developer Tools. And this is going to show us the network activity for any website. And we're going to use that network activity to build a better prompt. So now we're ready to hit search on the form, and we see some network activity. If we click on this first one, headers, we'll see we have a request URL. We'll save that for later, as well as a request method, post. And under payload, if we start clicking around, we'll see stuff that we entered into this form. So when this form is submitted, this is the network activity that gets transferred. And if we click view source, we'll get a format that we can easily copy for later. And if we click on response, we'll see we got an ID back, as well as a bunch of GUIDs under a heading called result. So we'll save all of this for later as well. And now let's take a look at this second request. This time the request URL is much longer, and we can see we've got all of these GUIDs separated by commas. And at the end here, we've got query and realm. Because the request method on this one is a GET, the payload is actually included in the URL. So we'll copy all this for later, come over to response, and here we can see the GUIDs that we put in the URL. We're getting more details about those results. For example, when the item was listed, the account name, the price, and some more details about the item. So we'll save all of this for later as well. And now we've got some really good context to include in our prompt. But before we do our prompt, I have a quick tip for you. If we go to File, Preferences, Cursor Settings, click on Rules, come down to Project Rules. I'm going to click Add Rule, and we'll call this Rust Quality. And under Rule Type, we'll say Auto Attached to Rust Files. And this will be from the App Source Story folder, run cargo clippy and resolve any issues. And if you remember back to our last code review, there are a bunch of little squiggles indicating problems with our code. And cargo clippy is a command that can find problems like that in Rust files. And what this rule does is we're asking our AI assistant to try to find and resolve those issues automatically. So I'm going to make another one for Svelte real quick, attached to Svelte files. This time from the app folder, the command is npm run check. And these won't work all the time, but it should help. And now we're ready to start our prompt. Let's make this a little bigger, and we'll say update lib.rs to search the Path of Exile to trade site instead of returning mock results. I filled out the trade site form based on the item text below and captured the network activity as an example of how the trade site works. Make sure to also update our item text parsing to support the new filters. And now we'll just start giving it some data. So item text, we have that, and the request URL, request method was post, payload, and response, and the next request URL. And that one's method was a GET, and the response, boom. Okay, now let's see what Claude comes up with. And now we got some more code to review. Looks like we got a bunch of new structs, which makes sense, right? We gave Claude a bunch of data and it figured out the shape of all of this stuff. And I've noticed that if you can provide examples like that, AI is pretty good at this kind of thing. And this part's interesting. We've got a mapping of things like increased movement speed to the trade site ID that we saw in the query on the payload. Path of Exile has hundreds of these stats, and so we'll need to beef this up later, but for now, this works. And in our parse item text function, we can already see that we got some new stuff. Looks like we replaced most of the old parsing logic, but the new stuff follows a pretty similar pattern. And this item category mapping is interesting. So it recognizes that when it says boots on the item text, it needs to translate that to armor.boots in the query of the payload. But I don't know where it got the rest of this data from. So I'm a little suspicious that this is incorrect, but it looks okay. So let's keep it for now. And finally, all the stuff that we parsed from the item text will end up as trade site filters. And here you can see we're removing the old search trade site function with the mock results. And here we got a new function, build trade query. And this looks like the query that we saw in that payload. So based on what filters we find, we're going to build up this query. And here we've got our revamped search trade site function. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change this client to include a user agent. A user agent is like a name tag for our requests. And I happen to know that the trade site will actually reject our requests if we don't include this. And you can see the editor has already figured out what I'm trying to do here. So I'm just going to remove this kind of crazy looking user agent and we'll say chiseled trade tool. And here we've got that first request URL. We can see that it is making a post, and that function we just looked at, build trade query, that is getting included in this request. And then from the response, we're taking 10 of those result IDs and we're going to stick them in the URL of this second request separated by commas. And finally, the response from that will parse into things like price, seller, item stats. And this all looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the cargo file. And Claude wants us to add these two dependencies. I think we're actually using both of these this time, but I don't recognize this Rust ls TLS stuff. And I think that Claude's trying to sneak some more garbage in. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And now we'll run it. We'll put in the item text for our boots again, click parse item. And it looks like we've got some new filters. Cool. Evasion rating, rune sockets. And now the moment of truth. Let's click search. Whoa, it works. We've got some search results from the trade site. But it looks like we got a result back that doesn't have lightning res or movement speed on it. And those were included in our filters. All right, so we've got a bug to fix. We'll need to look into that later. But this is still a big step. Our trade tool can search the trade site. Cool. So let's make another checkpoint. Trade site search done. And let's keep cruising. So now that we've got a bug, it's a good time to talk about debugging with AI. So what are we looking at here? We've got our AI code editor, in this case cursor, and it has some panels, files, prompt, terminal, and our AI model, Claude in this case, is watching over all of that. So let's walk through what just happened. We ran a command in the terminal to start up our app, npm run Tory dev, and once our app was running, we stuck some item text in there. That got turned into trade site filters, that got turned into a query, and then finally we got some search results. And it's at this point we noticed we've got a bug. We said to filter for boots with movement speed, and we got back some boots without movement speed. So naturally at this point we could say in a prompt, there's a bug where search results aren't being filtered by the movement speed filter. And the problem with this is that Claude can't see our running app. It doesn't know what item text we put in, and it can't see the filters, the query, or the search results. So it's going to look through what it can see, which is our source code, and it's going to do its best to come up with a fix. And if that doesn't actually fix the problem, now you might be tempted to say, that didn't fix it. Please try again. And so it tries again, and maybe that doesn't work either. And now what? It's at this point that you might just get stuck. And it's because Claude is at such a big disadvantage here. Interacting with our running app is such a goldmine of troubleshooting data, and it just doesn't have access to that information. But there's actually a really easy solution. We can just add some log statements to our code, run our app again to generate those logs, and then this time in our prompt, we're going to add those logs to help compensate for this blind spot. And I'm pretty sure the AI models will eventually gain this kind of visibility as the tools get better. But even then, I think that as a general concept, it's useful to think about what blind spots exist for your AI assistant and how you can fill in those blind spots to get better results. All right, so let's try this out. Let's open up lib.rs, which is our Rust backend, and let's scroll down to a spot where we can log the filters and the query. Right here looks good, so we'll log the filters and the query. Easy. Next, we'll run our app, and we'll reproduce the bug. So we'll stick in our item text, click parse item, scroll down a bit, click search trade. Here we've got a result with no movement speed. And now we've got some logs to share with Claude. We'll click add to chat, and now those logs are attached to this prompt. And we could look through the logs and try to find the bug ourselves. In fact, I'd recommend that, but I also want to show you that even if you can't find the bug yourself, this is a way that Claude might find it for you. So in our prompt, we'll say, there's a bug where search results aren't being filtered by the movement speed filter. I added some log statements to log the filter and the query. I reproduced the bug and captured the log output. Could you find and fix the bug? And we'll also include our item text. Now let's take a look at the fix. It looks like here we're taking the stat, splitting it by white space, and then looking at every word, removing a leading plus sign, removing a trailing percentage sign, and then trying to turn it into a number. So before we weren't trimming the trailing percent, and so 20% wasn't being parsed into a number. Nice, I think Claude fixed it. So let's run our app again and take a look. So we'll stick in our item text, click parse item, scroll down a bit, click search trade. And yeah, it looks like all of our results now have movement speed, lightning res, and life regen. Awesome. Let's go ahead and make another checkpoint. We'll call this one Fix the Bug. Nice.